Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Harrington Group International PPAP for Aero.com demo. This is a new cloud app that was just released, and we're excited to talk to you about it. I'm going to start off by sharing some lessons learned over the last couple of years working with suppliers that have been using spreadsheets for document authoring. And when I use the term document authoring, I'm looking at the process flow, the PFEMA, the control plan, the gauge studies, the DFMEAs, and then share the demo of what they designed. From a housekeeping standpoint, we have a great mix of people today from around the world, and it's good to see some high-level executives attending. And there's also a large mix of a couple of the OEMs and their primes and some very small suppliers. The phones are muted because of the people, but we'd love to take your questions, so you can enter them into the question block. A copy of the presentation can be downloaded now. There's also a flyer about PPAP4Aero.com and an example PPAP requirements document that we're going to talk about. All of you will also receive a certificate of attendance. The intended audience is hopefully people that already understand the PPAP process and the level of effort. So we're trying to, at this point, not teach you what PPAP is or how to do the forms, but just if you're trying to plan on implementing it, if you're new to the effort, which a lot of us in aerospace are, or if you're already doing it and finding it cumbersome and annoying, you're the audience. PPAP is already showing up on the purchase orders. If you're a smaller supplier and you haven't seen it yet, it's coming. So this is a must-do process. It's not optional. So we're going to talk about some common issues and challenges that companies are facing with PPAP, why they're facing them, and some ideas on how to solve them from both the customer and supplier view. Aerospace is very lucky to have two great professional organizations. First, the International Aerospace Quality Group, or IAQG. I was co-chair of the AS9145 deployment team, and what a great group of people to work with. The other one is the Aerospace Engine Supplier Quality Group, or AESQ. I just attended the supplier forum at the GE Aerospace facility in Cincinnati, Ohio last week. I'm going to share some of the information that they provided. In aerospace, you know, zero defects is a goal, and these two groups are working to simplify standards and minimize costs. And, you know, the challenge really is, with all this PPAP data that's being created, what decisions are we making? How do we go from data to decisions? If it's created and never used, that actually is the opposite. That increases costs and does not lower defects. Software tools so far, and I wouldn't call it, I shouldn't have said software tools. The spreadsheets are what's being used, and we'll talk about that. And I really don't consider a spreadsheet a software tool. But the other thing that's really important to understand and be able to articulate is every boardroom, every executive, every decision maker wants to know the ROI. So why bother? When you move from spreadsheets to a database, you can build a knowledge base and dramatically shorten the time and improve the results. Creation time, well over 50%. PPAP submission, much faster and quicker. PPAP effectiveness is critical. So that's interesting, but how do you do that? Well, one of the things is the use of product and process families when you're putting this together. And I'll just share one case study. I helped a bulk material supplier doing about 1,800 PPAPs a year, each taking hours and hours to create. And by using product and process families, they got down to 2 standard PPAP submissions that they just changed the submission warrant for the particular customer and the part number and product. When we first did this, they said, our customers will never accept this. And my response was, have them call me if they have any issues. And as of today, I've not received a call. Imagine going from labor-intensive, time-consuming 1,800 times a year down to very quick and effective. But the most important part of the slide is effectiveness. We spend all this time and money creating PPAP information. The question is it working? Here's some of the material that I got from the ASQ meeting down in Cincinnati. First and foremost, they went out to their suppliers, APQP, AS9145 PPAP is the highest rated challenge. Enough said. This one was interesting, though, because they also looked out and said, well, it appears as though the suppliers are working with on average, 3 to 4 of the engine component manufacturers. And the quote I have in the slide is from a president of an engine supplier: I'd be ecstatic if the engine OEMs would provide a single PPAP tool. So, at the conference, and they're talking about AS 13100 that combined 9145 into it through Chapter C. They said, these are the tools we need to support APQP and PPAP, DFMEA, protocol critical characteristics, process flow, PFEMA, everything on the list. And the response from the people in the audience is, we know what they are. We're just frustrated with the current process because managing risk in a spreadsheet is a bad idea. And this last bullet from the slide they use, zero defects thinking, manage the process to use feedback to ensure it continues to give us the right outcome. They go, yeah, I got it, but how? And the question is, how do I manage all the PFMEA recommended actions over 30 spreadsheets? And part of what this last manage the process is, we need to bring the right side of the PFMEA to life. We need to make it a living document, but how? And we'll show you that in the demo. Now, here's the state of aerospace PPAP digitization tools. Both of these great organizations have published spreadsheets or templates, and that's kind of what we're using so far, but we can do better. Now, just as a quick note, some of the larger companies take the forms and mess around with them a little bit. They may say, we don't call it operation, we call it process. Not a big deal. Unless you forget to use their form, or worse yet, use another customer's form and send it to them. So is this a big deal? Will this approach help achieve zero defects? In the automotive industry, Ford and GM told their suppliers they'll no longer accept these documents created in a spreadsheet. They want FMEA software required to ensure linkage between the effective documents and use the foundation or the product and process families. Now, working with these suppliers, the number one issue is broken links between the process flow, PFEMA, and control plan. I was with a group of auditors, and they told me that is the first place they go in to do an audit. Pull out a control plan and compare it to the PFEMA. They smiled and said almost 100% of the time we find broken ones. And there's a bunch of other problems. They sorted it and made a mistake. They cut and pasted it wrong. There's a lot of problems with it. And for the executives on today's call, this risk management is a critical business process. So why are we doing this in spreadsheets? We don't do accounting in the spreadsheets. We don't do purchase orders in spreadsheets. We don't do inventory control in spreadsheets. Why do we do it here? And, I've had other executives say, well, we've got supplier portals and project management software to do this. And when they say do this, they mean uploading spreadsheet files, and that's better than nothing. Well, maybe not. You can Google and find how customers have sued suppliers that got PPAP approved and then changed the process without updating the PPAP information. The customers win. And I've seen it the other way, where suppliers have used the information. The biggest thing when you're looking at this whole subject is understanding what your people need. There are 3 distinct levels of PPAP engagement. The highest level is oversight, the executives that are looking for dashboards and analytics. The next level is project management, where this often gets stuck and stops. But the most important part is the document authoring. the knowledge generation, retrieval, and use of it. The critical risk stuff we're doing in spreadsheets. And here's the problem with that. The problem is that oversight. They think that PPAP digitization is pushing spreadsheets into a project management tool or a supplier portal. The also problem with this is that 80% of the effort is focused on project management, not the document authoring process being done in spreadsheets. And the document authoring is where we get zero defects, or we pay for high MRB costs. So if you're late in project management, you missed a deadline, that's a bummer. But boy, if you mess up in control information, you're looking at scrap, repair, rework. Even use as is cost takes time and money to process. I saw this sign at an airport last week, and it made me think of this presentation. The sign said, "Build features that sales thinks customer needs." And what came to my head was buy software that executive thinks users need. And get rid of sales things, get rid of executive things, and focus on it. So what would something better than spreadsheets, but not too complex, look at? And this is all about document authoring, the third level. Keep it simple. Use it as a better document authoring tool to execute, not just program management, not just oversight. For part information, it'd be great if we connected to your ERP or PLM app. Better job creating the documents and approving them. For ops, some people say we're just going to import that from the router. But, a router is used for tracking time and material for accounting. The process flow, PFEMA control plan, that's about how I'm going to make it, what are my risks, and how I control it. So it's a little bit more than just pushing routers in there. And projects, the smaller the company, the less project management you need. So this is what the volunteers designed, and this is what we're going to demo today. I was told by somebody that they see this as a PPAP communication platform, and I thought that was a cool description. Wow. Communication, collaboration, engagement, all those things that we want. But we can't do when people are trying to find the spreadsheet or who's got the current version. So, how do you set up an app like this? Now, first of all, you don't have to set up anything to get started in the software I'm going to demo. You can just start entering and creating information. However, if you spend some time thinking about what a better process would look like, it really pays off. For example, hopefully you'll be interested enough to schedule a demo just for your team. And I always do that using an existing spreadsheet provided by the customer. So I can look at the contents and it relates to what they're looking at. And when you start looking at what's going on here, here's some trends I've seen. Sometimes people feel obligated to say the same thing in different ways, so they can't just repeat the same thing. It's rusty, there's corrosion, there's rust on the part, too much rust. Well, on the usability standpoint, that makes a document harder to understand, or at least frustrating. Here's another one. Some people feel obligated to provide extreme detail, rows and rows and rows and rows in the information. The ID is too small, the ID is too big, the ID is out of round. And when an FMEA repeats the same information on all these rows, people describe it as irritating. The IDs out of spec will suffice. Now, again, you don't have to preset these files, but importing customers, suppliers, part numbers, part records, effects of failure, prevention, detection, all these different things, sample size and frequency. Again, you can just start doing it. But importing is easy. You'll see throughout the demo this up arrow. And every time you see that, you get an option to copy and paste or click on a file to view what you're looking at. So let's take a look at the software. This is the main menu. I'm going to click on the help button and just take us through it. This is the reporting capability for all the data in it. This is the home page. This is where we put in parts. And even though I labeled this PPAP for Aero, it can do APQP as well. But all the details of part number, part name, rev level, and information on it. Then all the projects, how to manage them, track them, put them together. And by the way, projects are based on part number and revision level both, because they're different projects when you do changes. And then the gauge studies. And the most important thing the volunteers wanted was a library of reusable gauge studies. You don't have to do a gauge study on every 1 inch plus or minus 0.5 ID. You can reuse them. And let's take a look at this now. So let's go into the part screen. You'll see that this looks like Excel. The volunteers said, I love Excel because I can do whatever I want, and I hate Excel because of all those problems we talk about, break linkage and all that. So they wanted, like Excel, to move columns around, sort them different ways, filter them different ways. If I just want to see the military projects, the ability to sort and click on those, all that kind of information. Let's go ahead and add a new one. Just click on the add button. This will be PPAP for Aero.com demo. Put in the part name. Location is a way to control who can see and have access to it. So as a quality director, I might have all of them. As a quality manager, I might just have the 2 Cleveland facilities. It's just a security and control way about who can see it. Part status and the revision level. And that's all the required fields. The asterisk shows required fields. Everything else is optional. Once I get in here, though, we can go in and talk about what type of part it is. Again, these are all for reporting. I just did the bare minimum so you saw it's not that labor intensive. But let's go down here. You know, I want to enter my product characteristics, so I'm going to go ahead and hit that up arrow. And then I'm going to go over to my product characteristics spreadsheet. I copy these guys. This has come from engineering bubbling tools or export tools. And we'll go back in. I'm going to cut and paste. And I put in all the product characteristics. Same thing with process characteristics. Go ahead and look at that screen. Let's hit that up arrow again. Copy, paste. And my process characteristics in. Oh, let's see. It's got some safety checking on. It didn't like the class we're using. So we can go ahead and say that's a K1, critical 1, K3. Again, these are all user definable. You can set these up any way you want. And one more. And save. And then the last thing are the operations. Let's go ahead and put those in. Same up arrow, same cut and paste. We loaded our operations. And go ahead and save that. So, I mean, other things that were important is attachments. You know, the idea of I'd like the ability to, again, anything you want. I'm going to add a drawing maybe and put that in. maybe an ECR that we got from the customer or the supplier, depending on how what managing. One of the really cool things, and this will come up a little bit in meetings, but one of the users came up to me and said they record all the Zoom meetings with all their vendors regarding PPAPs, and they upload the recording into the note to have a record of it. So we've created a part. Oh, by the way, you can, the supplier you're buying it from, the customer you're selling it to, all part of the database. So let's start a project. So I'm going to go back to the project tab and sorry about that, I got distracted. Let's go ahead and do a new project. So same plus button. What's the project name? PPAP for Aero.com demo. This is where, again, these are user definable, but you can do APQP in here. I saw some interesting presentations at the AESQ conference on human factors. Well, let's just do a standard PPAP submission. What part are we using? So this will be the demo, PPAP demo. What revision? Now, revision was important. The volunteers went through and said, John, we sell the same part to several customers. And some, this customer's at Rev B, this one's at Rev D. He goes, that was just a nightmare trying to keep track of where things were. So everything's driven by part number and Rev, and then also, different projects when you change revisions. You can keep track of a supplier to you, an internal, you to your customer. Again, these are all optional, but the ability to put in as much detail or as little as you want. Search tags was interesting. This was the idea of hashtags the volunteers came up with and said, this is a front bracket or whatever term they wanted, or Boeing or whatever term they wanted, but those are all searchable tags. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save again. And then let's go over to task. Task was interesting. We spent a couple of days describing what and what we didn't want in here. And one of the things that was very adamant, especially from the small vendors, is don't make me do Microsoft projects, actual start, estimated start, look, it's just us sitting around a room. And then we also had some larger companies that said, oh, no, the project list is what I use in my executive meetings. So what they wanted was the ability to go in and add information and material to it, driven by either just type it in, bring it from a template, or copy it from another project. We'll just bring it in from the template right now. Again, these are all configurable. Set them up any way you want. I'm going to pick the 9145 PPAP submission. I'll hit save and overcome my tasks. Now, this is where it got interesting with the volunteers. So, the one person said, just make it look like Excel. Let me just, maybe there's a start date, maybe there's not, maybe there's an end date. So just the ability to go through and build what we want to see, how we want to see it. The software won't let me have a start date before an end date. Pretty good software. So you get the idea. Responsibility is, again, out of your user file. The software is by concurrent user, so you can load all your employees. It's just the licensing is based on how many do you want in the system at the same time. And then all the other thing that you used to use in web apps is, I don't remember Sally's last name, but I know it's Sally. And if you just type on it, it'll bring up the person that matches the partial search. And, I can assign things without due dates. So a lot of flexibility how this behaves. I'll put one more over here. Now, the spreadsheet mentality of the volunteers still maintained. I'm going to go back to that view for a minute. I want to be able to sort by responsible. I want to be able to sort by start date. I want to be able to sort by end date. This is the screen that the small vendor said, no, I need to have this. Now, the bigger guys said, oh, we don't use Gantt charts, but we like to know percent complete. That's fine. And another one said, no, we want to see the Gantt chart. So again, what I'm trying to articulate is you're not really forced to do anything you don't want. You just have an option of doing it if you want to. So let's look into the forms. So the way this is set up is you can have any type of layout or form you want. So I converted the AIG VDA forms over to the 9145 examples. Again, they call it process description, slight changes. You say, okay, let's start a process flow. And they go, oh, John, wait. We don't start with a process flow. We start with a PFMEA. Oh, all right, let's start with a PFMEA. Again, it doesn't matter how you start. Follow the process, how you're training, and use it internally. So let me go into the edit button. And I'm going to add, I can add a couple rows in here. Just keep hitting the plus sign. So I'm going to add put it up 10. Now these are all the ones I just imported. Up 30. Up 35. 40. 50. And 60. So you go through and start building it out. But this screen, you're going to see it a couple of times during the demo. One of the other things that kind of messed us up a little bit when we're designing it is the software technology creates a record of everyone who changed every record, every date and time, what it was, and all that. But looking at that was just way too much information for most people. I don't need to know that John went in yesterday and fixed the spelling. So what the volunteers asked for is, we're in the process of building it, we're putting it together. We can just save the changes and we don't need to mark it as a release. And I'll show you mark as a release and what that does in a minute. So we started building this out. Now, again, you say, well, wait a minute, we do process flow first. Well, if I go over to process flow, it's all the same material. And again, you can, I'm going to click this to get a bigger screen. If you want to see operations only, you can do that. If you want to see visual print mode, you can do that. Just a lot of flexibility in how you want it laid out. You don't want to see the angle. You just want it straight. Again, you decide how you want it. So same thing would happen in the control plan, right? If I typed it in, it's already in there. Now, as the volunteers started to understand that this is not anymore either one spreadsheet with a bunch of tabs in it or three different spreadsheets, they asked for this screen, the CTS view. And what this is the ability to see all the forms all together, all in one place, which they never really had the ability to see before. Now, again, remember, these are all heavy Excel users. So, John, Excel, I can pin this tab and I can pin this tab. So when I scroll, they don't move. And, in Excel, if I don't want to see product and process, I can hide these. So a lot of, let me put it this way. Anyone who's doing this process in Excel right now, as soon as they start to see the tool, it takes them about 5 minutes to say I'm in. It just simplifies life so much. Is it effective? I want to talk about this a little bit. Now, remember, you don't have to build up all these tables. But if you do, when people are selecting failure modes, they have the ability to, pick from a list so you get consistent. It's not 5 different ways to say the same thing. Again, everything you'd expect from a web app. It was an operator thing. I don't remember what they called it. So again, if I start targeting operator, I now filter out everything except operator. So faster and easier, but here's the right side of the FMEA. The volunteers said either make this useful or get it off the form because I can't use it. And all they wanted was do this to see if we can reduce detection rating. I'm sorry, improve. Let's reduce occurrence. Assign it. Oh, by the way, here's a nice one they like: spell checking. Of course, Excel is spell checking as soon as you remember to use it before you send it to the customer. And for all the quality professionals on today's call, there's nothing more frustrating to see typos in the documents. So real-time spell checking. Responsibility, give it to the same people. They'll get an email saying you've been assigned an FMEA action item with a link to go back into it. You know, when's the date? What's the status? And you can have one-to-end task underneath this is what these are doing. Let's do one more in here. Review machine vision systems to improve detection. Glad for spell checking. We'll give that to Sally. We'd like her to get back to us by the 31st. And it's open. Okay, this guy came back. And if we mark it as a release, here's what it's going to do. It wants to know what we did, like finished review with team and suppliers. Okay to release. And when we do that, it's going out and grabbing all the data and creating both Excel and PDF files that makes a record of what we had. And again, a lot of this came back with, I'll show you where that goes in a minute. A lot of this came back with, I don't remember what version we sent them. I don't know what version they're looking at. So again, just a lot of subtle things that may not seem that important until you're down at that third level of the people trying to execute. And now at any FMEA, I can go in and look at, here's the actions. I can see all the action, what Sally has, or just my actions. It just brings it to life and makes it a living document. It brings it together. Now, I'll come back to case studies in a minute, but once it's started to get built, you get an email notice if you're on a team, you get an email notice if you got a task, you get an email notice if you get an FEM item. They said, well, I need an action item button. You know, I need one place where I can see all the things I'm working on, both project tasks and FEMA tasks, and the same kind of, you know, sorted by start date, sorted by priority. This can do all the red, green, yellow stuff. But for if you spend time with people that wrestle with this every day of their life, huge smiles on their face. Life just got easier. So let's go back to projects. We were playing around with the forms a little bit. It also has meeting capability. Now, again, some vendors don't use that. They said, you know, it's just us. It's not a big deal. But if you want an initial kickoff, and if you want to upload that vendor recording of the meeting, it all has the ability to do that. You know, who attended the meeting, just basic stuff. Nothing really magical about it other than it ties all the documents and information together. And if you're doing team meetings, you might want to do team members. So again, the idea of I'd like to keep track of who's working on it. And by the way, these can be suppliers, can be on your team. You can have internal people. You can have customers, however you want to set it up. But this is a team member. We'll do another. Here's one of the executives. They're just a stakeholder. Just some basic fundamental capability to keep track of it. And then, of course, last but not least, the history tab that will start to show what the document was when you did this, when you created it, what the current version on, what you changed, what you revised, and how you put it together. So, pretty simple capability, but again, the challenge is not, well, the challenge is to give me a solution better than spreadsheets that's not too complicated. Time and time again, you make it too complicated, I'm going back to spreadsheets. Don't rush it off. So I mentioned about releases. When I said publish a release, this is what it created, and the ability to go through and manage those. Published projects are ones that you send out to the customers, and attachments. And one of the other things I want to make sure, because there's a question that popped up about red, green, yellow. I said it, but I didn't show it. This is the detailed task window. Again, you don't have to go here if you don't want to, but I can set priorities on it. So let's go ahead and make it a high priority. It's active. You can say it's a milestone if you got gates, so it just shows up as a gate on it. You can put all the attachments in here, link out to the gauge studies. You can do subtasks if you want. So again, as simple, basic as you want, but with all the advanced capabilities if you want to use them. Okay, gauge studies. Almost all the volunteers were using Minitab to do this. And they said, it's kind of expensive, but that doesn't what bothered me the most. What bothers me the most is here's the study, here's the data I put in, here's the results. I had one volunteer call me and say, John, I just got a call from our customer on the last PPAP submission. And they said, these reports are so easy to understand, highlight exactly what I needed. I don't have to go through 23 pages of a Minitab statistical analysis. I just want to know, does the gauge system need improvement? Is discrimination low? So, tolerance and total variation reporting. We also have the ANOVA reporting, and then, of course, attribute reporting. Simple data entry, but very concise, very easy to read layouts. Again, this attribute study says we got a problem. This is poor agreement across them all. So the idea of putting this together, I mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of things you can set up, and I'm going to go into admin now. This is, again, where I can import all my part records, family types, gauge study types, operational. You don't have to build these. You can build it on the fly. But I would recommend taking some time to do it so you get consistent and readable and usable material. The one that I always see messed up is in sample size. Sample size is how many, not how often. 10 parts every shift. Okay, well, you're combining them. And remember, the passion is readability, usability. So if you're smushing all these things up and the operator looks at this one, and then he looks at another one created by a different ME or QE, and it reads differently, they just get frustrated. So the idea also about, sample size, frequency, this is time, not how many, simple things like that. The other thing that's important is, I mentioned in the intro that the industry published some forms, and then your customers are tweak them a little bit. Same thing with this group. So what they asked for was, can I put together templates? So can I put together one for Raytheon, one for GE Aerospace, one for the various people, because they tweaked it a little bit? And the answer is yes. In fact, what I'm going to show you is I've used this a lot in training, and I call it the simplified example. This is where I go into the standard form and change it a little bit. Like, instead of saying control methods, we put in how could we keep it from happening? And instead of potential effect of failure, what would happen? Potential failure, but what would go wrong? potential causes of failure. Why did it happen? So you can go in here and say, where do what forms do you want them displayed in? What order do you want them in? You can add columns. But it really helps when we get back into, I forgot about this. These are all, you can move all these things around however you want it. These are recent documents I was in. So I'm going to go back into my demo file, go back into the projects. And let's just show you what that looks like. So I'm going to go back into forms, go into the PFMEA, and say, yeah, okay, that's the aerospace one we're used to. Let's trigger it over to this simplified thing. And now you see it in that layout. A couple things and why I'm showing you this. Making simple changes like this makes it easier for people to understand and move forward. But I know that when it comes to submission, you have to send it in their form. You go back and say, okay, everybody's good to go. Let's go ahead and put it back in their format and we'll publish it for them. And printing all these things go out to PDFs, go out to spreadsheets, a lot of flexibility in how you deliver it and put it together. That's enough for that, I guess. So I'm hoping that this intrigued you enough that you might want to call and go through a conversation with your team. By the way, we'll use data in one of your spreadsheets. One of the other things on this slide I forgot to mention, the software is available in English, Spanish, and Chinese, and that's all configured by your user profile. So I go in, I see it in English. Escobar goes in and sees it in Spanish. Jin goes in and sees it in Chinese. It just triggers the layout of it. So I also want to share with you some other things that Harrington Group's working on. And, everyone's talking about 4.0 this and 4.0 that. So I guess I had to jump on that bandwagon. And here's where I see the PPAP software maturity model. We're at 1.0. We got a bunch of people using spreadsheets. And when I say a bunch, I'm talking about 80%, 95% using spreadsheets. So the demo I showed you was, well, let's go to 2.0. Let's get off spreadsheets and do something that's better, but not too complicated. 3.0 is where we start working on single sign-on capability, integration with ERP, PLM, supplier portals, and then probably the last one in 3.0 is the analytics. Analytics that aren't even possible with these spreadsheets, but really comes to life with a relational database. And 4.0 is all the cool thing that everybody's talking about, AI, machine learning, deep learning, and we've got some exciting research underway with that. But these are not that complicated. I mean, to move from 1.0 to 2.0 is kind of a no-brainer. To go to 2 to 3, the integration challenge. By the way, all the logos are are owned by the respective companies. They're shown just for description of the global aerospace supply chain. There's no endorsement given or implied by using these logos. But you fit somewhere into this diagram. And again, they tweaked it a little. They use a little different. Is there some way we can put these together and use them all? At the AESQ supplier forum back in May of last year, 2022, basically all the logos on the screen said, we already have our own systems to do this. Now remember, when they say we have systems to do this, not all, but I would say a lot of them mean I have a portal to upload spreadsheets to, or I have a project management tool that we upload spreadsheets to. That doesn't solve the document authoring issue we just went through with ppapfero.com. Now, I showed you at the beginning at the forum last week, the AESQ forum, APQP PPAP is the top challenge. And the suppliers are working with 4 different customers. So it would be really cool if we could get a single tool for the supply chain that will then be integrated and fed out to these people however you want to do. Remember, the game plan is to drive rapid reduction throughout the global supply chain. The good news is integration challenge is not that bad anymore. Harrington uses the Microsoft tool sets, and the Microsoft Power Platform is really great, including built-in APIs with other big software companies like SAP. The Power Platform includes powerful workflow automation. I mean, a lot of good capability like flow down the requirements. A PPAP is triggered by a purchase order, an ERP. The analytics that are going to just change the whole executive view of this. The oversight group is connecting failure costs to the activity. Wow. We didn't think that was going to happen very often. How many times did it happen? And how much did it cost us? Wow, I didn't know that. Or you can also get, it only happened once, but it was a doozy. And again, these analytics are not possible in these standalone spreadsheets. So it helps transform all this data into decisions. And 4.0, this is the stuff that's really interesting. I heard a presenter say data is the new oil. And if that's true, then knowledge is the new fuel. Data needs to be put to work. That's what the oversight people, the executives, are looking for. And every ME or QE I speak with wish they had. We want to gain insights, make better decisions. I mean, show it to me by customer, show it to me by part number, by supplier type, by location. Across everything we're working on, is there particular causes of failure that are common? Did we fix it over in this location and we should tell these guys? Again, a lot of ability to do it and the ability to tie dollars with it. So, this is where it hits. As soon as we connect find failure costs, we can see if the PPAP's effective. It's a real good way to look at the numbers we kind of guess on sometimes. Occurrence. Wow, that is happening a lot more than I thought. Detection. Oh, we're great at detection. Don't worry about it. Low risk. What do you mean they found it at the customer? We missed it? Severity. Failure modes. Have we seen this before? Do we know what the cost is? Can we error proof it? A lot of exciting things happen. So PPAP4.com is available today. Contact us. We'll schedule a demo, go through it with your team using your data. And the other thing I am providing, but this next one you can download right now. If you have any problems with it, let me know and I'll send it to you. But I've seen some ridiculous requirement documents on this subject. It's almost like people are looking for a reason not to do anything. As a minimum, you got to define in scope and out of scope. It just clarifies things. And again, take a baby step. Shoot for a low-cost improvement versus a multi-million-dollar project. And this is one where most people don't do it because they don't want to think about it. We need everything, but need versus want is really required. Or we want everything, I'm sorry. Needs required, it's a must-have. One is, it'd be nice, but no, it's not a showstopper. Now, what's interesting is those answers will vary significantly depending on who you're asking. Are you asking the oversight group that wants the dashboards and analytics? Are you asking the project managers that really don't care as long as the project management works? Or are you asking the people that execute and author the documents? It all changes differently. A little bit more about Harrington Group International. We've been around for decades with over 45,000 customers around the world. Some of the people on today's call are existing customers, and we appreciate you attending. Our focus is short-term operational improvements and long-term financial results for a blend of tools like PPAP4.com and the service to support it. Our focus is cost-effective quality management software that grows as your business grows. And with that, let's see if there's any questions that came in. Hold on for a minute. Okay. Is the hosted version ITAR compliant? Yes. And the hosting site, ITAR audits, cybersecurity audits, all that stuff's available to give to your IT group for verification. Can you customize APQP or PPAP task lists? Yes. And I didn't really emphasize this, but the idea that I could go in and change the form around a little bit, the same thing applies to the task. This customer has 18, this one has 22. This customer calls step 1, this customer calls step 1, this. That shouldn't mess up your process. It shouldn't mess up your people trying to deploy it. So yes, you can set them up any way you want. What if we already have a big PLM app? It depends. First and foremost, don't ever pick a fight with large PLM apps. You will always lose. It gets back to go and talk to the people that are doing the document authoring. If I was in Vegas and I was betting, I'd put $100 down that they're using spreadsheets and uploading it to PLM. Now, I might lose the bet because a lot of the PLM apps start with the design FMEA and it automatically rolls into the PFMEA and it brings all this stuff together. The people I've been working with want something better than spreadsheets, but not too complex. So I guess, whether you're using it's going in ERP, it's going in PLM, it's going wherever you want, just go out and talk to the people that are doing the document authoring and use that as a way to go through and put it together. All right, that is the end of the questions. Thank you so much for your time. I hope to hear from you. And one of the other things, when you download this, I did put in screenshots of the stuff we went through. So you have the ability to show some of the people that. But thank you again for your time. Appreciate it. And hopefully it was helpful for you.